So somebody asked, are Christian prayers rituals? Okay, what do you think? Are Christian prayers rituals? Yes, why?
As there are 3 stages of the ritual passage, it's like the first stage is the separation state. When you close your eyes to pray, you just separate from your current world. And when you attach your consciousness to the mindscape, your consciousness in the mindscape, you enter into a liminal stage, and then at last you gain something from the maybe from God or the spirit, and you come back to the world, and you are transformed and become another changed person.
Yeah, so I think so. So I think prayer is definitely a kind of a ritual in that meaning, in the sense of Van Gennep. When you enter the prayer, and there are many ways of praying, but basically usually we don't see people kind of, well, but okay, but you know, if somebody was walking down the street and then without changing anything, started to utter some prayers and then stopped and just kept walking, so not changing anything, then that wouldn't be a ritual. But actually most people, when they pray, and no matter what the religion or what the style, you know, first you separate yourself, even if that means closing your eyes, or even if that means doing a special gesture, even if it means going to a quiet place. So maybe your eyes aren't closed, but you go to a quiet place, or kneeling down, or standing and facing a certain direction. So you normally, in any kind of prayer, you actually, you have this separation phase. You go into quiet, you close your eyes, or you actually put your body into a certain posture that is different from normal posture. So many different ways. And then, right, and then you enter the liminal phase. So this is the time that you're talking to God, or you're, right, sending prayers to God. And then, so this is liminal, because in normal time, we are not talking to God or not listening to God. We're just being involved in whatever we're doing. But then you cut that off, and now the focus is about the communication with God. So this is liminal. The liminal stage, then you as a normal person and the spiritual world somehow would be connected. And that's what, as you said, Yusich and my Christian friends told me that when they're praying, they give themselves to God. So you give yourself to God during that period of the prayer. But then the prayer ends, and actually then you kind of go back to acting normally. Okay, so if you got into this prayerful state and you have all these words that you're expressing to God, then somehow you don't just keep on that conversation and walk into class while you're still talking to God, right? No. You stop that, and then you go back to normal, right? So this is why the prayer is definitely under the Van Gennep structure of a ritual, of a rite of passage: separation, liminal, and reincorporation. Yeah. So then we, okay, then another question. What about meditation? Is meditation a kind of ritual? If you're going and practicing mindfulness meditation, is that a ritual?
Yes, I think.
Sorry?
Probably yes, because you will put yourself into maybe, and I think meditation will put yourself into another places that you will be flooded with all your mind, all the things that pops up in your mind, and then and then finally you come out with something being with all those things being named or being passed away, you should have some. Yeah, you can. I think it can be understood as you will be changed after the meditation. I think so. Yeah, so it can be classified as a ritual.
Yes, yes, I agree. I agree. So again, the meditation, because the idea is to get into a different mind state, and actually to right stop or get out of the normal state, enter into a state of relaxation, right? Even breathing in a different way, breathing more deeply, becoming more focused. So in this liminal state, it's then you are relating to your mindscape in a different way than normally. More focused on what's going on inside your mind, more focused on objects of consciousness, things like that. So this is during that meditation, and then you end it. And you know, in many so often there would be in some meditative rituals, there will also be a certain gesture to end the ritual, right? So to say, okay, this is finished, right? So that kind of closes the meditation session, and then you go back to normal life. Just like when you pray, like if Christians pray, they would say Amen at the end. And when they say Amen, that's kind of closing the prayer. And now you could go back to normal, right? So that's why there's often something like that at the end of prayers. It also is marking the end of the liminal state and entering the end of it to go back into normal, into the normal state. Okay. All right. Now I also had then another interesting question though, about what about, so there was one question here I want to ask you guys. What do you think? What about if somebody is actually experiencing some special events that bring enormous changes to his life? So like a traumatic stress, right? That some terrifying events which like separate you from your normal life, and actually will put you into deep suffering, and then that kind of leaves a wound on you. But then after that trauma ends, then you go back into normal life. So could this be a rite of passage?
Hello, can I respond to this?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, David.
So I think in a personal sense, yes, but in a societal sense, I think less so, because the rite of passage not only concerns with individual conceptions of what the reality is and what life is about. It also has a social dimension in the sense that it redefines your role in the social group, and it make the social group define you and your respective standings in that particular group differently. Mm-hmm. So say if you are to experience a traumatic event, of course that would change you as a person, right? But not necessarily in the sense that it will change how this society or how the social group they're in perceives you to do. So for instance, if you say have a traumatic experience, that doesn't change the societal requirement of you, say, to be a teacher, to be a student, to be a responsible member of the public, to be playing some specific roles that the society requires you to do, right? So in this sense, as long as the social group does not acknowledge it as a transformation in your role with respect to society, I don't think it can be categorized as a rite of passage.
Very good point. Very good point. Any other thoughts on this? So I think that you have really pointed out the so going through a so ritual is the ritualization is still something that is social. So even when we talked about the prayer or meditation, which is an individual act, but the actual act, how to do it, is still kind of taught by society. And so that's why it's still a ritual, even though you're doing it individually. But so a personal transformation that you undergo through traumatic changes, it is not fully a rite of passage. And actually, this made me think of several cases, both from the United States and China, which is actually very interesting. There was a case of actually a lot of American soldiers who are veterans of the Vietnam War. So they fought in Vietnam in the 1960s and 1970s. And because the war was very controversial, and many people in the United States were opposed to this war, and for very good reason. So when the soldiers, you know, and they were fighting in the war, and then they underwent severe trauma. I mean, they killed people, and then they saw brutal, all kinds of horrible things. They had such deeply traumatic experiences. But then when they went back to America, they were not welcomed as heroes. And so their trauma was unable to be, in fact, usually the soldier will come back home, and then they will be celebrated as heroes. And so that celebration, and there will be many ceremonies, you know, and they will be honored. And, you know, we have, for example, in Canada and the United States, November 11th, Remembrance Day, we remember those who died in World War I and World War II. So we actually have a ritual to remember and honor those soldiers. But there's no ritual to honor those who fought in the Vietnam War. So research showed that they suffered more deeply post-traumatic stress disorder because the society did not allow them to reincorporate properly. So they went into Vietnam and they had this liminal, deeply liminal traumatic experience, and then society did not reincorporate them. And actually, it's quite interesting that China has the same experience. So in 1979, there was the Sino-Vietnam War. And the Chinese soldiers went to Vietnam and fought in Vietnam and also had traumatic experiences, and they were not recognized after, or very, very hardly recognized. So this often happens with soldiers. Another case, I actually saw recently a PhD thesis of the Kuomintang soldiers in China who fought against the Japanese during the anti-Japanese war. So they actually had deeply traumatic experiences. But because they were Kuomintang, they could not be honored as lieshi, as martyrs, or as those who sacrificed for their country. So there was actually very clear. The communist soldiers were honored, and the Kuomintang soldiers were not honored nearly as much until the 1990s, when some people started to honor them. So those soldiers, so whether it's in America or in China, some of the soldiers, they did not have a ritual to reincorporate them back into society, and so their post-traumatic stress disorder was worse. Whereas those soldiers, so the ritual can actually help to overcome the post-traumatic stress disorder, in the sense that your sacrifices are recognized. You suffered, you were hurt, but yet still you feel that the society is honoring you and recognizing you, so it feels that your sacrifice was worth it, right? So this is. So I think that was a good point that you made, David, about the societal aspect of ritual, and how ritual can, so some social traumas are not ritualized, and other social traumas are ritualized. So in fact, many commemorations that we have in different countries, commemorating heroes, for example, are actually ways of incorporating, facilitating the reincorporation of those who have sacrificed themselves for the collective. All right. Okay, so another case. Suicide bombers. So is this a rite of passage? Suicide bombers. So, okay, Tom, you said, I think a suicide bomber can't return to normal life after it. But does a rite of passage have to be returned to a normal life? What if it's a return? What if it's after the rite of passage, you went to an even better, you were transformed, right? You were transformed. And in the case of the suicide bomber, the idea is that after they commit the suicide bombing, they will go to heaven, right? Yeah. So in a sense, yes, it is a kind of a rite of passage. So the idea of the suicide bomber is if they do this suicide bombing, they will rise up to the highest levels of heaven because they did this heroic action. So the preparing for the suicide bombing, maybe doing some kind of prayers and even entering, I don't really know about specific examples, but maybe in order to overcome any fear of doing the suicide attack, you might smoke some drugs or something like that, you know, in order to lose yourself, in order that you could do actually do the bomb attack. So you have to overcome that the normal person just simply will not be willing to commit a suicide bombing. So you have to separate yourself from a normal mindset and then go and then do the suicide bomb. And then after the liminal stage, then you go into heaven. So this is the idea. So I think a suicide bombing can be considered a rite of passage. Yeah. So this leads to the question then that not all rituals are positive, right? I mean, rituals can be, I mean, suicide bombing is the extremely destructive ritual. But even many rituals can be divisive. Because by definition, actually, a ritual includes some people and it excludes other people, right? Well, think about it even right away. I was just talking about commemorating the war heroes, right? So let's say you have a ritual in America to commemorate the heroes who fought in Vietnam. Well, the heroes are only on the American side, not on the Vietnamese side. And then same thing if you had the same kind of ritual in China, right? Well, the heroes are those who fought on the Chinese side, not the Vietnamese side. So here, a ritual always excludes. So this is why a ritual defines a community. It defines who is a member of the community and who's not a member of the community. So if you have the ritual, like we talked about the O-camp at Hong Kong U, it includes and it excludes, right? It includes who are those in the new freshman class, and it excludes, I mean, those who are not allowed to join the O-camp because they are not newly admitted Hong Kong U students, right? Or the rituals of the residential halls. So again, these create the community of those who are members and they exclude those who are not members. So all rituals are actually exclusive. Well, not all of them, but it tends to be part of the structure of a ritual that somehow it excludes. So there's a real problem with rituals in that sense. You know, Chinese New Year ritual, well, it is for family members. Of course, you might occasionally invite a few other friends, but even the friends who come are somewhat outsiders. It's clear that this is, you know, a family ritual. So non-family members are not members. And actually, so I'm going to talk about this more in a few weeks, because what's interesting is that when the world religions arose, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity, Islam, the Baha'i faith, different world religions arose, they actually, one thing that they did was to break out of very localized rituals and to have more universalizing rituals, to include more people together in their rituals. So that, for example, in Israel or Palestine at the time of Jesus, well, only the Jewish people were part of their own rituals. So the Jews had their own rituals, and then the Pharisees had their own rituals, and the Samaritans had their own rituals. So every group had their own tight-knit society and didn't include others. So Jesus, he broke that. And then he said, now anybody can be part of our ritual. It doesn't matter you are Jew or Gentile, doesn't matter which race you are, you know, all part of the same community. But then, okay, so it expands the scope of the ritual. More people can be included. And we will see this in the history of religion, that we see more and more universalizing communities that include more and more people. But still, they still have the distinction between, let's say, the Christians and the non-Christians, or between the Muslims and the non-Muslims. So there's something always about ritual that is divisive, and so that's a problem. And so society needs to figure out, especially in our society nowadays, that we have many, many different communities. And it's not like everyone in one community lives here and another, you know, another community lives over there and another community lives over there. So if they have exclusive rituals, it doesn't matter because everybody is living in a homogenous community. Now that's not the case. People are circulating, people have many multiple identities, and so no rituals cannot completely encompass. I mean, it just doesn't work so much anymore.